we'll get started. I think that's enough people here.
Yeah, ready to go.
So thank you for joining us, everyone. We're three physios from iMove in the running room. I'm Pat, we've got Emma and Mitchie.
Hey.
And we're just going to be running through a whole bunch of things that we think is super important in terms of how to run faster and stay injury-free. So I put this photo here as the first slide because I think that kind of sums up us and what we do. So that photo was taken 12 months ago on our annual retreat. So we've got Mitchie there on the side in his blue t-shirt, just going for a run in the morning because that's what we do and how we live our lives and how we like to interact with everyone. So I thought I liked that photo and I thought I'd pop it there. A couple of housekeeping things. For the best viewing, if you actually go up to the top right corner and hit view and then you can click side-by-side speaker, that will actually give you a better view of what we're doing and you can see our beautiful faces. If you've got questions, please pop them down in the chat box as well. Otherwise, we'll get people to stay on mute if that's okay. And I think something else to note is we're not going to be sitting the whole time and we'll have some contact details at the end as well. So please stay online. There's also going to be a lucky door prize at the end. So stick around for that too. Now, I think we'll just introduce ourselves.
Go for it, Mitchie.
All right, my name's Mitch. So I'm a physio at the Panania Clinic. I've always enjoyed running. So I used to compete in cross country back at school. So I'm pretty much going to give you guys a perspective of what it's like to be a has-been runner who just enjoys it recreationally on the weekends. And it's always been a part of my training. So really enjoy training runners because you guys are an awesome community. So really excited to be a part of this tonight.
I'm Emma. I work in the Miranda practice. So I live and hang out in the Shire. My primary form of training is strength training and CrossFit, but I try and squeeze a few runs in during the week as well. I'm a bit of a plodder, so I've done a few fun runs and I run the Esplanade a couple of times a week, but I'm currently training for my first half marathon. So a lot of the principles we speak about tonight, I'm applying to my own training, and we'll see how that goes. I might want to do a marathon, or maybe not.
Oh.
We'll see how we
We've
go.
got a recording of this, so we've got to hold it to it now.
Yes, that's right.
I'm stoked to hang out with you guys tonight. I love treating runners. You're all motivated and, exciting, a little bit crazy, which is fun. So it's gonna be a good night.
Yeah, heaps of fun.
And just a shout out to the people we've just let in who've just joined the meeting as well. Welcome. So I'm Pat as well. I work in the Clovelly Clinic. I used to work at the Roselle iMove. I'm a big runner. Running kind of dominates my life for the better, I'd like to think. I enjoy everything from just your 5K park run to running with mates, checking out the sunrise and doing a bunch of ultra marathons as well. So I identify myself first and foremost as a runner before anything else. So I love this stuff and I've been surrounded by it my whole life. I actually do a podcast as well with my colleague Mike. We've had a podcast called That's Running, which has been going for about 2 years now, and we're just coming up with our 100th episode pretty soon. So have a look at That's Running as well, because what we talk about tonight, we go into far more detail on the podcast as well.
And
anyway, that's us.
And because, I want to add, and because Paddy's a little bit modest, he's pretty much famous in Sydney, or at least the eastern suburbs. He's got a documentary about him, about his journey running UTMB, right?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
What's that, 100 miles?
Yeah, did a 100-mile race in France a year ago. And,
just a cheeky 100 through the Alps, across 5 countries or something, was it?
3 countries.
3 countries.
There's a good film about it.
Insane. What's it called?
It's called The 100 Miler.
100 miles.
Definitely go and watch it after this.
But I think the thing about us is we're not the sort of physios who will say, mate, you just got to stop running for 4 weeks. I think the thing about us is we're a bit different. We'll keep you in the game. We'll keep you running. And that is our pure goal because we know how good running is. It's actually really good. We know how important it is for your mental, physical, emotional health. So we'll do everything we can to keep you running and support you. We're on your team. We're not the guys who will tell you to have a rest. So I think that's important. And that comes back to our whys. I love running. I know what it can give you and can bring you. So I want to share that with everyone. So that's kind of our game as well. All right. So a couple of things. This is why we do what we do. So we know that depending on what research you read, 20 to 80% of runners get injured every year. And if you average that out, that's 50% of runners, which is like completely bonkers. If any other sport had a 50% injury rate, you'd do something about it. It's phenomenally high. And to add to that, runners are pretty weird. Runners are very unique people.
Crazy.
Only would you find a runner who says, oh, I ran and it hurt, so I'll just try running 10K. Oh, it hurt again, I'll just try running another 10K. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Runners are pretty weird. And so, but we understand that because we like to run. We've all got our different reasons for running. And I think we understand what it's like to be injured. We understand what it's like to not be injured, which is very important as well. And another thing is, running injuries are very poorly managed by runners themselves, but also by most health professionals. And I think there's just a lack of understanding of what it takes to manage a runner, which is kind of why we're doing these info nights as well, and why we like to get out and help you guys. And an important thing right down the bottom, usually you don't have to stop running. If someone tells you to stop running, hopefully it's because you've got bones sticking out, but otherwise usually you can actually keep running. And I think that's important to know as well. But it's also why you go to a running specific physio who can help you with that. So, all right, at this point, I want everyone to go to the chat box down the bottom. If you are currently injured, and I know there's a few of you on here who are, or if you've had an injury, just write it down the bottom. Take 10 seconds. Let's do that now.
Knees, hip pain, Achilles.
Oh my God, it's coming in.
Bulging disc, ITB, hamstrings, groin.
You're going to blow my computer up. Okay.
Knees, hamstring, Achilles.
See if we can get to that 80%.
Yeah, this is more than 80% of you.
Hips, knees, ankles.
Okay, right. So we're justified in talking to you guys today, essentially. Right.
Okay.
So there's a lot there, and they're literally popping up faster than we can read them out. Okay, so everyone who just wrote something just then, we're about to make sense of all of it. Every running injury, unless you get hit by a car or run into a tree or do something silly, we're about to make sense of pretty much every single running injury. So the next 30 minutes will be well worth tuning into. So where are we? The L word, the 4-letter L word. It's not love, it's load. So everything we do and talk about involves this really boring word called load. So what load is basically every time you hit the ground, a lot of load goes into your body. So every time you come into contact with the ground, say you run 10Ks, you usually hit the ground between 9 and 10,000 times. So you're doing one repetitive thing 10,000 times. There's a lot of load going into your body. So every part of your body, whether it's your Achilles tendon, your knee joint, your ligaments, your cartilage, your muscles, every tissue in your body can tolerate a certain amount of load. And if you put more load in your body than your body can tolerate, you get overloaded, and that's when pain happens. That's when niggles happen, and that's when you get injured. So it's everything we talk about is going to come back to that. How much load can you tolerate, and how much load are you putting in? So with that in mind, pretty much everything we want to do is to increase your load capacity so you can tolerate more load. Simple as that. The more load you can tolerate, the more you can run, the more you can have a great life. But you've got to be careful not to overload in the meantime. So it's this little balance. I've written down there, it's like a delicate dance. You've got to add a little bit of load, take a bit of load out and balance and make sure your body's responding well. And that's very, very hard to do, which is why so many bloody hundreds of injuries just popped up in the chat box. It's very hard to get that balance right, which is why people get injured. So we'll go through how to manage that and how to be smart and sensible about it. Just saying hello to the few people that have just joined the chat as well. Thank you for joining. Any questions below, just throw them in the chat box. So this little slide here, it's a seesaw. So this comes from a very smart man by the name of Tom Goom. He's one of the leading running researchers in the world. It's a very nice diagram of a seesaw, which is just balancing the load that you're putting into your body versus the load that you can tolerate. So if we think about the load you're putting into your body, it's obviously first and foremost, it's your running, like the training that you're doing. And that we look at that in terms of the volume, so the amount of kilometers you're running, intensity, frequency, the type. So is it hills? Is it trails? Is it flat? Are you on the track? So lots of different factors about how you're training. Then we also look at your load capacity. And this is where it's quite complex because everyone can tolerate a certain amount of load and that changes all the time. So it depends on your strength. It depends on your control, your flexibility, your tissue sensitivity. It depends on your biomechanics, like how you move. It depends on your gait, your technique. It depends on previous injury, all these sorts of things. Notice like footwear doesn't make that list. We'll come back to that. So when people say, I've got an injury, it must be my technique. That's completely missing the mark. Technique is one part of it, but there's also like 10 other factors we've got to address. Or if someone says, oh, it must be tight, like maybe, but there's probably 10 other factors we've got to look at as well. And you have to investigate all of these and work out what's relevant for different people. So it's at this point, I'm just going to go back into the chat box and I'm just going to like find one that's right in front of me. Kate Wiggins is popping up and it says shin splints. So shin splints is basically overload of your shin bone in your knee. In your knee, I just said that wrong. Below your knee. So shin splints or medial tibial stress syndrome. I'm just rolling with Axe, it's in front of me. So if we think about it in terms of this seesaw, it's simply running too much compared to what your shin can tolerate. So if we think about running technique, your technique massively influences how much load goes into your shin or your bones. Also previous injury. If you've had shin splints in the past, you're pretty likely to get shin splints again unless you do something about it. If we go down the list, strength, the stronger your calves, hamstrings and glutes are, the more you can take load away from your shins, which is useful. And if we think about control, if you can like balance and control yourself on one leg, you'll be able to absorb load so much nicer than if you don't have control. So as you can see, just with shin splints, that one example, there's quite a few factors that come into play. It's not just weakness. It's not just running technique. So we always got to address all the factors, but importantly, balance that load versus what you're putting into your body. So, whew,
yep,
I just spoke a lot. I'm thirsty.
I'll take over.
Yeah, help.
So I'm going to talk about how you can increase that load capacity, or in other words, that skinny guy on top of the seesaw, we're going to make him fatter. There's two ways to do that: strength and consistency. So we'll start off with strength training. Strength training is magic for runners, and all runners should be doing this within their program. It can reduce your risk of overuse injuries by up to 50%, which is huge. You can literally half your risk of injury by incorporating strength training into your program. Mitch, you had a good comparison here.
Yeah, so with 50%, sometimes people hear that number and they go, oh, is that a lot? It's not a lot. To give you a bit of perspective, seatbelts reduce your risk of dying in a car accident by about 50%, and seatbelts are now mandatory in every single car, and you can get fined if you don't wear them. So if you're running, basically we should make it almost mandatory that you're doing some form of strength training around to support your running, because it has such a massive effect on reducing your risk of injury, which is what we're all here about, right?
And
100%.
if they don't do strength training, we should fine them.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'll be issuing them soon.
Wear your seatbelts when you run, basically. So not only can it reduce your risk of injury, overuse injury, it can increase your economy by up to 8%. So basically, economy is you're able to do more with less effort. So you can run further, run faster with less effort from your body. So you get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, so those Nike shoes that everyone's been wearing the last couple of years, the Nike 4% that came out, it's named that because it increases your running economy by 4%. And we know that strength training increases by up to 8%. So
double it.
Yeah, so when people are buying fancy gadgets, I'm like, man, do some squats, you'll get better, or do both, which is what I'm going to do is both. Yeah.
And then on top of that, it can improve your time trial, your 5K time trial by up to 5%. So basically, just by incorporating strength training into your program, you can decrease your risk of injury, improve your efficiency, and get faster.
So for most people, a 5% increase in your 5K time trial, we're talking 45 to 60 seconds off your 5 kilometer PB, which is just like,
massive.
Ludicrous. Yeah.
So I've got a question for you guys now, and I'd like you just to put your responses in the chat box. What muscle group do you think works the hardest within running? So each time you take a step, which muscle group works the hardest? We've got the gastrocs, the glutes, the hamstrings, quads, glutes, calves, calves. Yeah, we've got lots of glutes coming in.
Everyone's been told they've got weak glutes.
The booty.
The booty.
Glutes, calves, soleus, hamstring. We've got a bit of everything. What about quads? Quads, there we go.
Disappointingly, I'm seeing some of my current or former patients with the incorrect answer. You should know this.
All right, so we've got a bit of everything. Lower limb, or obviously hips, knees, ankles. It is, as you can see from this slide, the glutes are taking a lot of body weight, 2.8 times body weight during a step, during a run. Quads are taking up to 6 times body weight, but check out the calves down the bottom there, and in particular the soleus. That is copping 8 times body weight every time you take a step. So what is it, 9,000 steps that you're taking during a 10K?
Yeah, if you're on a 10K, about 9 to 10,000 steps.
And your soleus is copping 8 times body weight throughout that whole run.
If you weigh 50 kilos, that's 800, is it? Kilograms? Don't quote me on maths.
I'm a physio.
But it's a lot of, that's, so essentially if your calves, specifically your soleus, if that is strong, man, you'll enjoy running so much more. If it's not, you're just exposing yourself to being overloaded.
Yeah.
So what's the soleus, right?
Yeah, it's the little green muscle on the right there. So it's a calf muscle. It sits underneath your gastrocs. Your gastrocs are the big calf muscles that you can see. It attaches down into the Achilles and into the heel. So a lot of you that were saying that you had Achilles issues, perhaps look at your soleus.
Yeah. And so the thing with the soleus is it's active when the knee is bent. So therefore, one of the most important strength exercises you'll do as a runner is a bent knee calf raise. That's probably the thing that I give most, if not all of my runners at some point along the journey.
And we're going to go through one of them.
Yeah, if you took anything away from today, it's just if you did bent knee calf raises, you're going to see a huge improvement in injury risk reduction and your performance. So
yeah,
just do them.
Easy.
Cool. We'll come back to that too. All right.
We are going to bust some myths. So this is our bullshit slide. So first one, if you're strength training for running, most people think that the idea is to go low weight, high rep to match that endurance sort of effort that you need during running. Whereas in fact, the best way to improve your strength is to lift heavy and low reps.
I think this touches on something that's pretty important. A lot of people will do, say, 50 or 100 squats and say, I'm doing my strength work. From our point of view, that's not strength work. That's building muscular endurance. Or a lot of people say, I do cycling and the cycling is good for my quad muscles. I'm building strength. It's not. You're building muscular endurance there. When we talk about strength, we're doing something that's so heavy that you can't really do it more than 10 times. That's how heavy it should be. That's what we call building strength. We don't need endurance. We build our muscular endurance when we run. We've got that. All runners have that. We train it most days. We need to train the strength. That's where the evidence is.
Lifting heavy. And then off the back of that, a lot of people worry that lifting heavy will cause them to become bigger and slower. So will I gain weight or additional muscle mass? Whereas the studies that we looked at, and there's a lot of studies that have been done, showed that runners that did strength training didn't change their body composition. So they got quicker, they reduced their risk of injury, and they didn't get bigger.
And one quick thing to touch on as well is in the injuries, I saw quite a lot of stress injuries, stress fractures, and in different areas of your foot. And we know based on the research that if you were strength training heavy weights for low reps more frequently to complement your running, you can actually improve your bone density, so make your bone a lot stronger, so you're less likely to get a stress injury later on in the future. And you can only really get that by like doing heavy squats, heavy lunges, heavy deadlifts, like those types of exercises, and a bodyweight exercise doesn't really cut it.
Yeah, 100%.
So it makes your muscles stronger, it makes your tendons stiffer, and it makes your bones firmer, essentially.
Yeah.
Harder to break.
Bloody get into the gym.
Lift all the weight.
And then lastly, static stretching. So you'll see a lot of runners before they go to run doing their quad stretches and their calf stretches. Static stretching isn't bad for you. However, it hasn't been shown to improve performance or decrease your risk of injury. So if you're stretching because it feels good, then go for it. But if you want to reduce risk of injury or choose a warm-up that's probably more appropriate for your activity, I would be choosing to do a light jog, maybe some leg kicks, some hops, and you can use this opportunity to do some balance and proprioception work as well.
Yeah, which actually has benefits. Yeah.
How many times have you had a runner come in and say, "Oh, I've got terrible balance"? And I'm like, "Oh, maybe there's something you can work on." Simple stuff.
Yeah. But if a runner comes in saying they have tight hammies, I often don't really care if your hammies feel tight. It's not relevant. I just noticed a quick question that's popped up from Josh. He said, "How often should we incorporate strength training on average?"
It's in the next slide.
We're about to get there.
Yeah.
Good question. Speaking of.
So what does strength training for a runner look like? So the literature, and we recommend 1 to 2 times per week, heavy, slow, and low. Heavy weights, low reps, slow reps. body weight will not cut it. So if you think about we spoke about before, the soleus is taking 8 times body weight during running. So doing body weight exercises in the gym isn't going to cut it. You need to be going heavy. You need variety and progression in your program, and you need exercises such as heavy compound movements like squats and deadlifts, multi-joint, lots of muscles, calf raises, straight and bent knee. So Patty touched on this before. The bent knee calf raise will target the soleus. The straight leg calf raise will target the gastrocs. So incorporating them into your program. And then you need some single leg stability exercises. Every time you take a step during running, you need that single leg control. So you need to be doing that sort of stuff in your program.
We'll get onto that. Little one from Alberto, he's just said any plyometrics. There's arguments for and against adding plyometrics into a strength training program for a runner. For me, when you're close to the limit of your load, like when you're feeling pretty stiff and sore and you're doing a lot, I don't ever add plyometrics into that. But if say you're somebody who normally runs 50K a week and you're pretty comfortable with that, but you're down and you're only doing about 20Ks a week, you've got room to add plyometrics into that. But otherwise it's a lot of strenuous load on your body. And if you're running a lot, running's kind of almost a plyometric exercise in itself. So not a lot, only if a runner is like well below what they can tolerate.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, when we mean plyometrics at the gym, we don't mean do like 50 or 100 box jumps all in one go and think you're going to get like more explosive and stiff. Plyometrics in essence are meant to be done when you're trying to improve your tendon's ability to contract really fast and really stiff. It's meant for quality. So usually if we prescribe this in a clinical setting, we might give someone maybe 5 or 10 like real short and snappy reps of something like a hop or a skip or a box jump. But it's about each rep being as good, as powerful as possible, and making sure that the quality doesn't fall off, because that'll really complement your running and your strength training if appropriate.
Yeah. We've got just a few more questions here. If we don't get to them all, we will come back to them at the end and do as best as we can. Just a couple here. Tom's asking what age should a runner be before weight training? I know Tom's got a little girl. Basically, you can't be too young. All you're going to do is get stronger and more robust. There used to be an old school thought that you stunt your growth if you do strength training, which is like, no. If you think about what a kid does in a playground, they'll jump out of trees, like fall over, do stupid stuff. Like a few squats isn't going to stunt their growth. So it's never too early. Adrian, who used to work at iMove, who now lives in London, has popped up with a question. Thoughts on positive adaptation with training only 1 time per week? Understanding it's tough for those running 6-7 times a week. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mitch?
Tricky question.
I feel like if you're not doing any strength training at all, starting at once a week will be enough to cause some positive adaptation. I feel like you'd need to be moving to twice a week pretty soon though.
Yeah.
I think most of the research really does support a minimum of 2 to 3 to hit the amount of volume on a consistent basis to see an improvement in strength. However, if we're comparing 1 strength session to 0, there's going to be more adaptation to 1 strength session per week than 0, because 0 aren't doing anything. So I think that's what Emma said, is like, if you can just fit something in, that's a really good starting point. But where doing it 2 or 3 times a week really helps is you can get more volume in a week, and it gives your body more chances to adapt to the stress. But it's better than nothing. So if that's what you can fit in, absolutely.
1 is better than none, exactly.
Yeah, and this is what really excites me, that we're having a discussion around, well, how much should we be doing, rather than telling you should do it. Like if we're starting to get the message across that yes, you should be doing strength, then our job is done. If we're arguing over 1 or 2 a week, like, mate, you're going to get better, because strength work for runners is what we need to be doing.
Awesome.
Sick, awesome. The comments, like questions are flying in, but we've actually got to move on. We'll come back and touch on a few if we can.
We're going to get everyone to stand up now. We're going to get your calves or your baby cows working. These 3 exercises, I mean, there's hundreds of exercises you can do. We've chosen 3 that target those requirements. We're going to do a bent knee calf raise today. So if everyone could please stand up, I'm going to give this a shot. So bent knee calf raise, we're going to start standing on 1 leg, then you bend your knee. So come into sort of a quarter squat position. You can hold on to something if you need for balance. From here, I'm going to get you to rise up onto your toes and then down, keeping this knee angle the same all the way through. So your body should be lifting up and down. We're running through this at 3 seconds up, 3 seconds down, 3 seconds up.
I'm seeing some pretty good calf raises here.
3 seconds down, pretty good. Good, keep going. So this exercise here, as I mentioned before, is targeting the soleus, which is the lowest, or the calf muscle that is sort of closer to your ankle. So as you do these, you should feel the burn coming down through your calf muscle.
So how many would you say we should be aiming to do before we can go heavy?
Yeah, well, if we're talking heavy exercise, as we mentioned, it needs to be heavy. So you need to be holding on to weights or a barbell or something heavy. We're looking at reps of between 6 to 8, below 10 pretty much. I'd usually recommend 6 to 8, 3 to 4 sets. And these sets need to be challenging. Those last few reps need to be a push.
Okay. So really good starting point with that is to try what you can do up to about 10 reps. And if you can do 10 reps and you're like, oh, I've still got plenty left in the tank, make it heavier. A usual starting point, I guess some of us use, is like a 10% of your body weight is a really good starting point. You weigh 50 kilos, grab a 5 kilo weight, see if you can get to 10. If you can get to 10 too easily, go heavier. You can't go wrong getting strong in the words of some good physios out there.
Tegan asked what we can use if you're not comfortable going to the gym during COVID. Anything heavy you've got at home. I was literally using a gas bottle during COVID to do my exercises, like whatever you can find.
My dog weighs 25 kilograms and he doesn't mind being squatted. But a few questions have just popped up surrounding that as well. We're going to send out an email to everyone on this call afterwards, which will have our running fundamentals in it. So all the strength exercises that we recommend, most of them can just be done at home. If you've got something heavy to hold, it's all in that PDF as well. So we'll send that out afterwards.
Yeah, you'll all be getting that.
And get super creative. And worst comes to worst, like if you have to buy a kettlebell or a dumbbell out there, buy 1 or 2 of them, and then they're a really good tool. And there's so many different exercises you can do with a dumbbell or a kettlebell. Really good investment.
Yeah.
And a kettlebell costs about the same as like 1 or 2 physio appointments, and it will probably save more than 2 physio appointments.
Very good.
Just saying.
And then we're going to go through consistency. So that's the other aspect of increasing your load capacity is consistency. So the more you run, the better your body gets used to running and the less chance of getting injured. So we know that from, inexperienced runners are more prone to injury than experienced runners. And this can take years. So consistency takes years to build up.
Yeah.
The way we measure consistency, it can be quite complicated. And that's why if you're struggling with overuse injuries, it is useful to see a running physio. There are many factors that can play into consistency, and we went through them before. It's, minutes on your feet, Ks, intensity, terrain, all sorts of things. I feel like the easiest way to think about it at the moment is to just calculate your Ks per week. So calculate Ks per week, keep it fairly consistent. If you're trying to increase on that, just small increments per week.
Yeah. And it's also, sorry, I was going to say, like, a very basic measurement is like kilometers per week, but it is far more detailed in reality. And we look at your chronic load and your acute load. So what you've been doing for years, what you've been doing the last 2 weeks. And this is where like a good running physio will sit down with you, get your Strava out, go through your loads, see what you've been doing and take into account everything with you. So it is hard to monitor.
So when you say like a small increment or increase or decrease, what would you usually advise to someone who's like a general blanket rule?
The old rule used to be 10% increase in load per week is safe. But if you think about it, it kind of doesn't make sense, because if you run 10 Ks in a week, then it means the next week you can only run 11 Ks. The next week you can only run 12 Ks. And if you want to run a marathon, it will take you forever to build up. So there's the 10 to 30% rule. So if you're someone who runs 80 Ks a week, a 10% jump to 88 is actually quite significant. But if you're someone who's only running 15 Ks a week, then a 30% jump is quite safe. So there's this like 10 to 30% rule, which it's not even a rule, it's just a guideline, and it's super fluffy because it depends on if you've been running for 6 months versus 6 years, because experience is a huge factor. Do you do strength? Do you have a background doing CrossFit, or do you have a background doing couch sitting? Is like super relevant. So like it's not a rule, it's just a thing, and that's why it's a big discussion. It's all grey, and that's why you've got to nut it out. Get a running physio on your team who knows this stuff and can help you with that. I think that's the big thing.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
All right, Mitch, you take it away.
All right. So the next part of the equation is talking about how to reduce your load input. So Em's done a really good job talking about how to improve our tolerance to load. So we're going to talk about different ways that you can manage the amount of load going into your body when you're running. So unfortunately, we can't change gravity. We can arguably change your body weight, but we can make you more efficient with where that load can go. So what we're going to talk about here is what we commonly do in the practice in the clinic is look at your running technique. So having a running assessment, we do that at every iMove clinic, and we strongly encourage it for any physio clinic out there that's treating a lot of runners or wants to treat runners is get a treadmill and watch people run. Recovery strategies, and then also your footwear, because we do know people want to ask a lot of questions about your footwear, so we can't do a running thing without talking about shoes at some point.
But it's never just your shoes, which a lot of people seem to think it is.
So technique. So as I said before, have you had your running looked at? Running is a skill, and we want to try and help you get better at that skill. So definitely get in, whether you've got an injury or not, at somewhere where they can assess your running and show you how you run and how you could be better to either treat your injury, prevent you from an injury that might have plagued you through your running journey, or if you just want to get better at performance, because we know there's things that you can do to get to be a better runner. I know Paddy works in a clinic with a treadmill, and I see him in here checking his technique all the time just because he can. And I know he learns something new every time that you do that, and I do it as well. So really good resource. But that also feeds into the next point, that there's no best way to run. So we're not going to get you in here and say, this is how you run, this is how you should run. Let's change your technique completely to make you run like this picturesque runner. We're going to show you a technique of a particular runner, which is pretty interesting. But it's more about finding the most efficient way for you to run. And we're just going to have to continually work on that. And it's about small little incremental changes over a long period of time through your running career, through your journey, to get you better and better each time. So the way we do that is we shift the load, right? So I like to think of the L word, load, as a bed of timber, and you've got a bunch of nails in there, and every step you take is hammering one of the nails. If you've only got 3 nails, you've only got a certain amount of options with how many nails you can hit and how often you can hit them before you run out of things to hit, and that's when you run into problems. So when we change your running technique, all we're doing is increasing the amount of nails, increasing the amount of options for you to distribute the load through your body differently with how you run, right? So I personally do this when I run. If I feel a little bit of a niggle in my knee, I'll just change my stepping a little bit. My knee will feel a little bit better, and then I'll drop my cadence, and then I'll change my step width, and then I'll change how hard I'm hitting, and you sort of play around with it for a run. I wouldn't imagine running 42 kilometers at the exact same speed, the exact same cadence, the exact same step rate, all that the entire time. You've got to have these little tools in your toolkit where you can pull them out when you need them. Yeah. And like, would you ever run 100K or 100 miler at the same like consistent pace?
No, there's variation all the time. Yeah. Or you've got to be the strongest person in the world.
Yeah, you've got to be an absolute freak. Right?
And people on this call aren't. Sorry.
So we've also got your foot strike and overstriding, and they're the 2 main technique faults that we kind of look for, because they're the ones that we know can have an impact on your running. So overstriding is just how far your foot is in front of you when it hits the ground, and where exactly are you loading through your foot when you're landing. But if you're a heel striker or a foot striker, not a huge difference in injury risk. We just want to make sure that you're not too far on the end of either spectrum, and that we're making sure it's fitting in with how you're running and your goals and any niggles that you might have. And we normally do that by checking your cadence. That's probably the simplest thing that a lot of you guys can even play around with. If you've got an app or like a phone watch, like a Sunto or a Garmin, a lot of those have cadence on them these days. Your cadence is how many steps you take every minute. It's usually a number between 140, 150 up to 200 is probably the highest I've seen. And have a look at what your average cadence is, and then try and increase it by 5% while you're running and see how that feels. And it might feel really good, it might feel really odd, it might not feel very good. See what it does for your joints, see what it does for your ankles, and see how it works. And then if you feel like it's a really good option for you, it loads your body differently, use that when you're out there and running. It can be really helpful, because we know a 5% increase in cadence gives you 20% less load in your knee, your hip, and your back. That's which nice. Is, huge. Yeah. I'd love to feel 20% better when I run, because running sucks sometimes and it hurts. But you don't want to do a big change, because 10% actually increases your metabolic load, and it's too hard. It actually makes it a lot harder for you, because it's too different to what you're used to. So it's got to be a very small, gradual, delicate dance, as you were sort of saying.
So this is where, so some early research on cadence came out a bunch of 10, 15 years ago, which suggests that everyone should run at 180 steps per minute, which this should have gone on the bullshit slide. It's just completely wrong. It was that 180 came out of looking at Olympic runners. So yeah, if you're running at the Olympics, maybe run at 180, that might suit you. But if you're running at 150 steps per minute and you go to 180, it will feel weird and odd, and it's wrong, and you should not do it. It's going to change your loading patterns too much. So we always recommend a 5% increase, because that's pretty safe. There's not really any downsides to it, but it will have the desired effects.
Yeah, absolutely.
I could rant about that for an hour. I'm not going to.
So here's a video of what was his name? I'm terrible.
So this is Haile Gebrselassie, who is probably the best distance runner of all time. He's an Ethiopian, Olympic champion, marathon champion. Let's just look at his feet.
Yeah. Oh, ugly technique. Terrible.
You're watching Haile Gebrselassie, the world.
No, I'd want to correct that straight away.
24 world records over.
What's this called? Put it in the chat box. What are we looking at? What's it called? Look at his ankles.
Video of what some would call
I don't know how he's finishing any of these races.
Yeah.
Excessive inward rotation.
So what were his credentials? Like, what did he achieve?
So world record holder in most distances. He's Olympic gold medalist over 10,000 meters, and he's won most world major marathon champions. So this is, we're talking about the best, probably distance runner of all time here.
Pronation Nation.
Yeah.
Pronation Station.
So, as we said, this particular runner has done a really broken ankle. I like that. This particular runner has found the most efficient way to run, and he's gotten so good at it that he's the best runner in the world. So there is no reason to correct his technique when he's consistently breaking records and winning everything.
So it's long been believed that pronation's bad, and that if your ankles roll in, you're going to get hurt. This is clear evidence that it's not. If you've been rolling your ankle and pronating your whole life, it's probably quite normal for you. And if you can tolerate that, like we're just balancing the seesaw, right? Remember that seesaw from earlier on? If you can tolerate loading your ankle and your ankles roll, we don't care. In fact, pronation's good, usually. Pronation is literally the suspension in your foot. It's how you absorb load. For some reason, a lot of people want to block pronation, but that's like taking the suspension out of your car and expecting to have a better drive. It just won't work. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, which leads us on to
footwear. All right, so I promised we were going to talk about it, but we're not going to spend too much time on it because footwear is not the silver bullet. And I repeat, it is not the silver bullet. That new pair of Asics is not going to fix your injury. It's not going to make you the best runner out there. 90% of runners can run in 90% of shoes 90% of the time, right? So the major thing to think about with running is, and where it's really important, sorry, I'm just laughing at Ronan, the important thing with choosing a shoe, because a lot of runners will come and say, oh, like what shoe should I get? Like this is what I want. The best thing is whatever shoe feels the most comfortable to run in. So we're really lucky enough to work with a couple of really good running shoe shops that, you know, you can get on a treadmill and actually run on the treadmill in a shoe and give it a test before you go out there and run in it. So just doing the little 5-meter jog inside an athlete's foot, it's not really going to cut it half the time because it's really hard to gauge whether or not that shoe's really comfortable for you. But your foot's got thousands of nerve endings in it. So why would we not listen to what our feet are telling us and what our ankles are telling us in the shoe and listen to some force plate at some random shop to tell us what shoe we should and shouldn't get, when the research just does not support that, and clinically it's just not the case.
So the whole thing about shoes, most people buy a shoe based on whether it's stability or neutral. So the traditional way of looking at it is if you overpronate, then you should buy a stability shoe to remove that pronation. So there's so many like issues with that. Like there's no definition of what overpronation is. And it's not even science-based. It's just an assumption because pronation kind of looks weird. It looks odd. Maybe we should stop that. And if your feet roll less, maybe it looks better. But that's the whole footwear industry is literally built on that. And millions and millions and millions of dollars have been made for Asics and Nike and Adidas because people pronate. It's just not science-based. So I think the stability versus neutral argument is dead in the water. Stability shoes shouldn't exist. And that's my little rant, sorry.
So that's a good rant. So the question comes to that 10%, the 10% of runners who can't run in 10% of the shoes 10% of the time. That is where clinically, if I have a client in front of me who has an injury and they're running and they want to continue running, we will look at their footwear and go, is there something that we can do with this shoe? Can we change it? Do we need to put something in there? Do we need to work with a podiatrist to maybe look at some orthotics for some temporary help? Or are there some shoes out there that might really, really help you? So for instance, if someone's got a really, really sore plantar fascia and they're just like, no, I need to keep running, but I just want this pain to get a little bit better, we might just say, okay, like let's have a look at potentially getting an orthotic in there to give that plantar fascia a bit of temporary support, or something like a Hoka, which is the old thick boys. I saw some running there, really big cushion shoes with a rocker. But in saying that, you do that to help you get by temporarily while you work on the rehab that you would need to for that injury to get your foot really strong, get your plantar fascia really strong, and wean yourself off that shoe, because we know that shoe variability is really, really good. And like I run in 2 or 3 different pairs of shoes. I know Pat's probably got 20 pairs of shoes that you cycle through, because the shoe will load your foot slightly different. But we can't use shoes as a predictor of you're going to get this injury or you're not going to get this injury or anything.
And when we look at running technique, we look at where can we shift the load in your body, like away from your knee, away from your Achilles. It's the same thing with footwear. Is if you, like a nice example is your Achilles tendon. If you have a shoe that's flatter or with a lower drop, that will load up your Achilles tendon more. So if you've got an Achilles tendon injury, a shoe that's less flat, that has a heel raise in it, will be nicer whilst you're injured. Yeah, it's basically like that. If you're uninjured and you're comfortable and running fine, then footwear's not an issue. Absolutely. And then when someone says, what's the right shoe for me? I'm like, what's comfortable? And like, that's kind of it. Yeah.
Cool. So that's footwear done. Now, this is probably even more important than footwear in my opinion. Yeah. And a lot of the research is actually really going towards this, to even be more important for almost any injury out there for any sport. More important than exercise is your recovery. Is mainly exercise, running, lifting, all this sort of stuff is a form of load, or another word is like another form of stress. And when you put your body under this type of stress, what happens is your nervous system goes crazy. It goes into that fight or flight response, because that type of stress used to be, in our old ancestors, used to be for a form of survival, right? People didn't run for an enjoyment 10,000 years ago. They run to get away from something that was going to kill them, or to eat some food so they could survive. So we still have that primal thing where your nervous system goes into that fight or flight response when you run. And that's kind of where you feel like really wired, like you feel really pumped up of energy. You come off the run, that sort of runner's high, you feel really good. The endorphins are pumping and the adrenaline's going. That's kind of what that is. And it's a great feeling. But the problem is if you go straight from that run, get in a car, sit in really shit Sydney traffic, scream at the guy cutting you off, and then go into a stressful job, and then you come home to kids, you're constantly up here all day, and your body does not recover when it's up there very well, right? You get an increase in cortisone. You then will have up to 50% reduction in tissue healing time if you're chronically stressed. So what I like to think of with a run to optimize it is people go, oh, what should I do for a cool down? I go, whatever stretch you want. If you finish a run and your calves are tight, do a calf stretch. That's cool. But I want you to finish that run feeling super calm and relaxed. You might still feel really energetic and in a really good mood, but your heart rate needs to settle down. Your breathing needs to settle down. You need to feel like you've just sort of dialed the notch back down to 5, where it was at 10 or 11 during the run. So I like 3 or 4 minutes of just really slow, deep, calm breathing while you do whatever stretch or activity that you want to do at the end of the run. It only takes a couple of minutes. I like calm down instead of cooling down, because I get a bit anxious or super excited when I run, especially if you're running pretty hard. There's also some good research around a whole bunch of other things like hot and cold immersion, massage, stretching, nutrition, hydration. All of these things can really aid your recovery. There's some good research to show that regular like sauna and cold water immersion is good for your recovery. So if you can get to our Coogee clinic and get into that hot cold pools that they got there.
That's why we just opened up a new space inside recovery at Coogee for that exact reason.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was there, I'd go there all the time. Massage. So if you're in the Sydney area and you can see Magic Mike at the Roselle Clavelli Clinic, really, really good. Just again, to get that nervous system to calm down, get those muscles nice and loose and feeling good. Stretching, nutrition, hydration, that's giving your body the nutrients it needs to recover, because when you do that running and exercise, you're stressing out your muscles. And then as soon as you finish your run, your body's trying to adapt to that stress that you just put it under, and it's trying to get stronger and faster. If you don't eat enough, drink enough, or sleep enough, those things aren't going to really, really help. So that brings me into the next one. And this is the big one, sleep. If you are not getting at least 7 hours of sleep consistently, you are a huge increased risk of running injuries. And it's any injury at any time. You're also high risk of a whole bunch of other stuff, but we're not going to get into that. We're going to get into running. Huge increased risk of running. So there was a study there that showed 1.7 times greater risk if you didn't consistently get at least 8 hours of sleep. Right. And this was measured a whole bunch of other variables that they looked at across these athletes. And they found that the sleep was the best predictor if someone was going to get an injury. So they even compared that to like some of the running load stuff and all that sort of thing. For this particular study, and it's not the most ideal study because it was done in younger people, but they actually found that sleep was the biggest predictor. So make sure you get to bed, because that's where your body recovers the most. Your brain is actually 3 times more active while you're asleep than when you're awake, because it's doing all these recovery processes while you're sleeping. So make sure you're getting to bed. Don't stay up and watch Netflix. When that thing comes up and says, "Are you still watching?" on Netflix,
Go to
you
bed.
need to go, what's more important, watch another episode or smash my 10K and not have an injury? Like that's the sort of stuff that's really, really important, but it's also really hard to do if you're really busy. So working with someone to come up with some strategies to help you with that's super important.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Lovely. Okay, so, right. What this brings me to now is everything we've talked about is kind of like how to reduce your risk of injury. And we know that from the first slide, 20 to 80% of runners get injured per year. And our goal is to keep you towards that 20%. The only way to stop running injuries is to actually not run. So we got to keep you towards that 20%. So I think it's important to just at least mention that sometimes you do have to stop running. If you're so sore, the walking hurts, and a little bit down low on the slide is if you can't hop, you probably shouldn't run. But they're rare, right? Most cases you can run. If your knee's a bit sore, if you've got a bit of Achilles pain, if your hip's a bit niggly, most of the time you can run. And if a physio just says, hey, like 4 weeks off, you're probably at the wrong physio, to be honest. So in most cases you can kind of run. If someone's got a stress fracture, you're not running. That's kind of black and white. But I think what we need to understand is how irritable is the tissue. Has it just happened? Is it really red raw and flared up? Okay, maybe we do just need to take a week off and let things settle down. But if you're dealing with a chronic injury that's been there for a long period of time, you can probably keep running as long as you're doing the rehab and everything else you need to kind of strengthen that area. And this is, again, it's very grey. It's not black and white. And this is why you need like a physio on your team. Someone who's not going to say, hey, take 4 weeks off. You need someone who's saying, hey, yeah, like keep running, do 60 Ks this week, but do these 3 other things and make sure your sleep's right. Get someone on your team who can kind of work with you. I think that's like, it's actually super important. And if the physio is good, you only need to see them like a little bit. Hopefully you don't need to see them that much at all. That's kind of what we sort of angle for. Definitely.
Yeah, there's even good studies that have shown that when you are under the care of someone like a physio or someone that's like working with you on a whole bunch of stuff and treating you as like a whole person, not just like, oh, I'm going to treat this ankle or this knee, but looking at all this extra stuff, that it decreases the amount of time that you're away from your activity, right? So that's the whole reason people come and see us in the first place, is because not so much the pain, like pain's really annoying for a lot of people, but it's more the pain stopping you from doing the stuff that you really want to enjoy. And that's why someone comes and sees someone or a physio or gets a bit upset or frustrated with it, is that if you work with someone that is going to help you with this stuff and not just slap on and say, oh, just don't run for 4 weeks and your knee will be sweet, then I'd probably just go, all right, I want to find someone who wants to keep me running or give me a bit more of a solution.
That's when you slide into iMove Physio's DMs on Insta.
Yeah, feel free to hit us up with any messages.
Speaking of, we're here to help you guys and support you guys. So what we're doing for everyone who's on this call, we're offering, if you book in the next 48 hours, 2 half-price sessions with us. So I think there's a lot of value here. So anyone who commented at the start that you got an injury, if you've had one recently, you need to get your phone out now and you need to book. I think if there's anyone who's actually looking to increase their load, or you've got a goal coming up, or you're doing the SMH or you're doing UTA, you should get your phone out and get your running looked at, book a run assessment. I think if you want to increase your performance, you've got to get that looked at. Create a plan. Get someone on your team who understands it, whether it's designing a strength program, which we do, looking at your running technique, or actually sorting out a niggle and creating a plan to get it better. That's when you need to actually book in. And you guys all have access to 2 sessions at half price. I encourage you to use it. We're going to send out an email after this, which will have a unique link in that to book in. So that's us. That's Mitchie, Pat, and Emma, and they're the clinics that we're at. So definitely hit us up.
Yeah, so I think that's really important. And the other thing to say that if you aren't local, like if you aren't in Sydney, we can do a lot of this stuff via telehealth. I know Pat, especially during COVID and even up until this day, still treats people.
Yeah.
Didn't you have someone from like England or like some really far away country?
Netherlands, New York, Sweden, Norway, Indonesia. Yep.
Yeah. So it kind of limits the ability to assess the running as accurately as what we can do in the clinic. well, we can go over your running load, your sleep, your hydrate, your strength training, your all of this stuff.
If you're not in Sydney. Yeah.
If you're not in Sydney, via telehealth as well. So
And if you're in London, what about the running room in London?
I don't know if I want to see you, Adrian. Of course. So we will definitely work out the time zone. If it means I have to get up early, it just means Adrian's mum has to get me some butter chicken because that stuff is the bomb. But yeah, so even if you're not near the 3 clinics that we work at, the other clinics, Roselle and Coogee, they can all sort of take care of you with these sorts of aspects as well. So please make sure you reach out, and we'll definitely offer that for you as well. So I would say jump on the link.
Links in the chat.
Yeah, links in the chat.
And you'll get an email as well.
Thanks, Mick. And I guess while some of you might be doing that now, we might just pick out a couple of questions and then we can sort of wrap up there.
Get your phones out, follow all of us. So there's iMove Physio on the running room, but also the podcast that's running. And there's about 90 episodes on that podcast now. So anything we've talked about tonight you want more info on, there's probably an episode on that's running on Spotify and Apple. Or just shoot any of us a message. So whether email us or shoot us a message on Instagram, we're all pretty active on that. So feel free to shoot some questions through for that.
Yeah.
We'll leave that slide up there so you can all jump on Instagram and follow us. And I'm just going to jump through a couple of questions that we have in the question box. If you have anything now, just chuck them in now. We'll hang around for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the main content is done. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Really, thank you so much for giving up your Wednesday night. We really appreciate it. And I think interacting with the community and giving back to the community is a huge part of what we do. And to see hundreds of you on there tonight is just fantastic. And I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, it's been great.
Super awesome. Super awesome.
So I'm just going to jump through a couple of questions that are in the chat box now that are there. We've got Adam Ware. He's asked me if I've changed my mind on running UTMB. No, I'm not going to do it again. No.
And we have a voucher offer as well from Pace Running Shoes. So I saw a few of you post some running shoe shops in the chat. We work closely with Pace Running, and they're offering a $200 voucher for one of you that has been on the chat tonight. So you'll get an email tomorrow as to whether or not you've got that or not. They've got stores all over Sydney. So
check your emails. Don't just throw it out in the spam.
Yeah.
Any other good questions? Cool. What about roller? How often and how long? I'm assuming that's a foam roller. I love a good foam roller because it's a great way to do a self-massage because I can never convince my girlfriend to massage me. So the foam roller, it's shown some good benefits in reducing DOMS post-exercise. That's probably one of the best things that I've seen the research to support it. I will generally use it here and there in the clinic if someone ever mentions they've got like tight muscles or it feels tight or it feels a little bit sore. I'll go, cool, let's try this for a couple of minutes. Just do it for a couple of minutes and that's it. I don't want you spending half an hour or an hour on a foam roller. And where foam rollers have been proven to be quite effective is reducing DOMS, which is delayed onset of muscle soreness, which is you go for a run on Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday, you feel a bit stiff and sore. And foam roller is superior to doing nothing, but it's not superior than going out for a nice easy walk or a nice easy bike ride. So some very basic low level activity is really good. But if you can't do that, you don't have time, jump on the foam roller for a couple of minutes and give it a go. It's really good for you.
I've got a question from Karen, who's asking about getting back into running following a stress fracture. This is where we have to be really careful, and it depends on a number of things, Karen. So it depends on which bone was the stress fracture in. Some of them are quite low risk, some of them are quite high risk. We also take into account a lot of stuff in your history. Do you have a history of strength training? Do you have a history of any what we call RED-S, so like any malnutrition or eating disorder issues? Do you have any history of anything else that would affect your bone health or your bone mineral density? Once we take that into account, we build a very, very careful plan, which will increase your load whilst kind of taking into account your symptoms. So kind of depends on how recent the stress fracture was, where it was, and a lot of things in your history. So it is quite complex. And Karen, feel free to shoot us a message because we'll go into that deeper, but it's very personalized, I should say.
Yeah, so many factors with that one.
Wayne's a run coach and he wants to collaborate. So DM us.
Get in contact, yeah. Keen.
Absolutely. I saw one about sleep that I thought was very good. People were asking about naps. If you can fit a nap in, 100%. So it's the same thing as the training once a week versus training 0 times a week. The goal is generally at least 7 to 8 hours. And what the research sort of indicates is that if you're not hitting 7 to 8 hours, it is kind of like a pass or fail. Like, you do need to try and hit that number. It's not kind of like, oh, I got 5 hours, which is better than 3. It's kind of like, well, you're just not hitting that benchmark. So what some research is actually coming out and supporting is just trying to take some regular naps throughout the day. So if you can't, no matter how you rejig your schedule, or you've got kids and all that sort of stuff, which is definitely really challenging, if you can't figure out a way to be able to fit in that more continued sleep, then fitting in a nap throughout the day is the next best thing that you can possibly do to help. So definitely fit in some cat naps. I think Ronaldo, the famous soccer player, has like 7 or 10 naps a day or something crazy like that. Yeah, like 10 to 15 minute naps. The dude's worth like $10 billion or something, so he can afford
Gets paid to nap.
But what's his marathon PB?
Oh, I don't know.
We had a couple of questions about strength training and running, so whether or not you should be doing them on the same day. The answer is yes, you can, but I would recommend doing your strength training on a day that's less intense or less volume for your running. So run first, do your strength after, but choose a light running day to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because it is tricky, and it does raise a good point. If we're asking you to do strength twice a week and you're running 5 days a week, 6 days a week, like, where do you fit that in? Don't do it on a long run day. Do it on a day where you know your load's going to be a bit lighter. So you can do strength in the morning, interval session at night, or vice versa. Or you can do an easy run and then strength at night. But it is ideal to separate them by about 6 hours or more to allow adequate recovery in between each. But you can do them on the same day. But again, if you're trying to run 6 days a week and then add strength in on top, man, you're better off dropping a run and putting strength in instead. So much better. You will actually, we know it improves your running economy. It'll improve your decrease your chance of getting injured. So if it's like, how do I fit it into my 5 or 6 runs a week? I would argue strongly, drop one of those runs and just replace it with a strength.
Plays into your recovery as well, recovering from your running.
Yeah, big time. Any other questions, Mitchie?
I saw one there that wanted your thoughts on the carbon shoes, on whether or not there's any research to support their benefit.
Oh yeah, I did see a question pop up, which is gone now. I don't know who it's from, but about carbon shoes reducing load. And is there any research on that? So the answer is, well, carbon shoes have only existed 2-3 years, and there's actually no research on there. Do they reduce injuries or anything? They just haven't been studied because it's that new. The whole idea and the whole premise of a carbon-plated shoe with a 4-foot rocker is it reduces the negative work done around your ankle, which basically means your ankle and your calf do less work. So one could theorize and surmise that it would decrease the load done around your ankle. So potentially that's an assumption based on the mechanism of the shoe, but there's no evidence on that. But you'd think it might. But then again, these shoes are designed for racing and for fast running. They're not designed to be used for running 100 Ks a week. You just don't do that in these shoes. Yeah. There's no data behind that, but you just don't do all your running in those shoes. That's not what they're designed for. Yeah. Cool. All right. Any other questions? What do you got, Mitchie?
One was just about the offer. If you have to book in both sessions now. No, you can just book in the first appointment now, and then when you do come in and see us, that's when we'll figure out what works best for you and what's most appropriate for that second session. If you've got a current injury, we're probably going to want to see you pretty close to that first one. If we're trying and playing around with your running technique, we might want you to get a couple of runs in under your belt before that second session. So just book the first one in, and then the second one will come in once you see your physio. Yeah.
Another one, which has just popped up, 2 people have kind of touched on the same question there, Max and Lauren, is Max says, do you recommend grass or concrete? And what's really interesting, the really cool thing about the human body is we can adjust really well to the surface that we're running on. If you think about like a gymnastics mat, something that's got a lot of spring and a lot of bounce and cushion to it, you can land really firmly on that mat and it won't hurt. But if you think about landing on concrete, if you land on concrete, it's going to hurt. So your body will naturally soften up. If you jump onto concrete, you'll soften because you're landing on a hard surface. If you're landing on a soft surface, you can land really firm. It kind of won't matter. So what's really interesting, and this has been studied, that if you run on concrete or grass, you will naturally soften or stiffen given the surface that you're on. If you're running on concrete, you'll soften your landing. If you run on grass, you'll stiffen your landing. So the net force is the same. So when people ask, is it better to run grass, concrete, whatever, I've got this injury, I don't care, because your body will adjust to that automatically. It's really freaking intelligent and impressive. So it doesn't matter. Sand is different, because sand's the ground moves under your foot. So it's actually completely different. It just chews your calves and feet up a lot. So there's a lot of load going into your calves on sand. So if you've had any Achilles or calf or plantar fascia issues, just careful there. But sand is almost like a different sport, really. But concrete and grass, the net effect is actually not too different, really. I hope that helps Max and Lauren. Yeah.
And I got one more that I think would be pretty cool, which I think a lot of runners probably have experienced this. Is it okay to run with an injury if the pain goes away after a mile or so? That was Wing Wong. What do you reckon?
That touches on something that's really good, is like running through injury, running through a niggle. And it is complex to answer. So it depends on a few things. It depends on what tissue we're talking about. Is it knee, Achilles? Are we talking bone? What are we talking? If we're talking bone stress, you've got to be super careful there, because that's the one thing you don't mess with. You don't really mess with bone. There's a lot of kind of thinking out there that with running, the goal is not to be pain-free. You can run through 1 or 2 out of 10 pain most of the time and be okay. And it's not a huge concern unless it's bone. If it's bone, you pretty much want to be pain-free the whole time. So if we're talking about an injury that's been there a week, just rest, man. Just let that settle. Give it 2 or 3 days. It'll probably go away. But if it's been there for 6 months and you've got 1 out of 10 pain, you can run through that. Like, that's very, very, very low risk. So it depends on a lot of factors. How long has the injury been there? What tissue is it? What body part is it? And what are you doing to manage as well? Are you doing rehab? Have you seen someone? Do you know a plan? Have you worked it out? Do you understand what's going on? So if there's any questions that you're just not sure, reach out to us. I mean, you've got that offer. Whether you're in Sydney, like, come and see us. If you're not in Sydney, we'll do it online. Like, we can. It's important to understand what the tissue is and actually get a plan around that. Super important. That's where most other physios will fall down. They'll say, hey, just stop running. But man, 80% of the time you don't have to stop running. So just keep running.
Just some guidance.
Yeah, slip into the DMs. Yeah. Cool. Oh, wow. These questions are going to come all night, and I'm going to...
Yeah.
I'm going to do 2 more, right? And I'm just going to pick a couple that are just there. Where are we? Tom Fry has said, so the 2 key messages are strength and sleep. Like...
Yep, get strong and sleep.
Yeah. Like,
just don't do both at the same time.
So it's the seesaw, right? It's balancing load in versus what you can tolerate. And to tolerate more load, man, you've got to do strength. And to manage the load going in, like, you've got to sleep. Otherwise, you're not recovering from that load that's going in. So yeah, that's actually, man, Tom, you just summarized it in 2 words: strength and sleep, basically. If all runners slept more and did strength, the world would be a happier place.
Yeah,
I think. One more.
Last one.
One more. I'm just gonna find one. Where are we? Give me one more. Okay. Okay, this is one for you guys. Do you have this is the last question. Recommended time frame for soft tissue therapy or massage?
So is that like how...
I suppose after a run, right?
After a run? Well, usually the thing that I'm looking for if I'm going to get a soft tissue therapy or massage, something to help me feel a little bit better, is I'm probably not going to do it the same day as the run, because usually the same day as the run, even though you might be tired and exhausted, your muscles and tendons aren't really that stiff or sore. But usually that soreness and pain that you get a couple of days later is named DOMS, so delayed onset of muscle soreness. And it just means that muscle soreness comes on over the next 2 to 3 days. So if I'm thinking, like, I've just done a race, I ran my first half marathon on Sunday, I'm probably going to book my massage in on like Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday, like 1 or 2 days later. I'm going to do some stuff at home, get a really good night's sleep, make sure I eat a lot, maybe spend some time on the foam roller, and then I'm going to go see Magic Mike at Roselle and get him to massage me and make me feel a little bit better. But that would be how I would do it.
Yeah.
You guys got anything else?
I'd be doing it in preparation for a race. So perhaps making sure that your recovery is 100% leading up to the race. So doing your nutrition, your sleep, and getting your massage 2 or 3 days beforehand.
Yeah, good. Awesome.
My input on this is, if you're really nudging the limit of what load you can tolerate, it's all these little things that can make a big difference. So if you're generally like an ultra marathon runner and you're just doing a couple of 5Ks a week, you don't need a massage. Like, sleep's not that important. You're well below what you can tolerate, so you're safe. It's when you're pushing what you can tolerate, that's when you got to be very careful about your sleep, get the massage, get your nutrition spot on, because that's when there's that tipping point of, are we going to get niggles? Are we going to get injured? So that's when it's crucial for me. And yeah, do it the week leading into a big event. I think like the day or two after a long run is probably when you get it done. And that's when there's most use for it, I think, is when you know you're pushing yourself. You're in a big training peak. For sure.
So like a practical example might be for people in Sydney who are training for UTA in May, right? Your running load's probably going to slowly increase over the next 2 to 3 months, getting you prepared for that.
Yeah.
And you don't know how your body might be able to tolerate that load because you're gradually increasing it and you're just going to see what your body can cope with. So that's where you would sort of go, oh, okay, look, I've just had a really big 3 or 4 weeks because my coach or my plan has really ramped up. I feel a bit stiff or niggly. Maybe I'll just go get a massage for a day, for a session, take it easy for a day or two, spend some time on the foam roller, and then get back on there and continue your plan.
Yeah, big time. Super. Okay.
Cool. Thanks for your questions.
I think there's going to be about
questions.
1,000 more.
Come in and see us.
I need to get
We'll
to
have a
sleep
chat.
because we all know sleep's super
Yeah.
important. So we're going to have to end it here, but we can stay here all night.
Shoot us a message on Insta, send us all an email. You're all going to get that link to book in. Come and have a session with us and we'll go through all this stuff and find out what's relevant for you. But thank you so much for tuning in, for giving us an hour of your weeknight. Now let's all go and get some dinner and food and sleep. Thanks,
Sounds
guys.
good to me. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. I'm going to stop sharing that.